the record button going. And, I just remind myself of all these things as I go along. And so, yeah, you'll be able to receive the slides, you'll see the recordings, and you can always feel free to contact me if you have any questions or any troubles accessing it. You'll also be able to find contact information for our presenters, such as Rebecca. And with that, a little bit more housekeeping is just a reminder that yes, I am recording this session. If you decide that you do not want to have your video on the recording or your audio, feel free to just always use the chat box. And you can close out your video, close out your audio, whichever works best for you and whatever is most comfortable for you. We're just using it mostly for people who couldn't come to the session and wanted to review it and learn a little bit, because sometimes we get busy and we can't attend everything. I want to let everyone know that yes, many of us are still working from home, and so there may be interruptions that come into play, whether it be, internet connection or, children in the background, pets in the background. It happens, totally normal, not a big deal. And if sometimes for some people with spotty internet connections, turning off your video is actually really helpful for that. So if that happens, maybe try doing that first. And if not, I will be checking my email. So that way, if you run into any issues, you can feel free to email me separately and I will try and find a way to get you connected back into this. With that, we do have one more workshop coming up after this, which will be next week on Wednesday, October 14th. It's going to be from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. And this is going to be on the top 10 organic social media strategies. It's going to be with another partner that we've had this year, Three Girls Media, and they're going to be discussing most effective social media strategies for nonprofits and how to use major social media platforms, discussing pros and cons of each and which one can serve your organization the best. So feel free to go ahead and sign up for that if you are interested. You can access that sign up at spsgives.org. And with that, that's pretty much all that I have to do for housekeeping. So I'm going to go ahead and pass off to our presenter today, Rebecca from the Ostara Group. Thanks so much for joining us, Rebecca.
Thanks, Melissa. Hi, everybody. Good to see some of you again. Excited to be here and talk about year-round giving strategy. So, years, right now, minutes turn into minutes, hours turn into hours, days turn into days, weeks. Like, what year is it? I don't know. But we're talking about 2020, right? And what's been quite an interesting year. And so I am going to share my screen and we're going to get started. So today's topic is talking about year-round donor engagement and sort of ongoing donor cycle. And what I'm hoping to do is I'll keep an eye on the chat. Melissa's going to help me do that as well. But if you have questions along the way, please ask. I will certainly ask for feedback and thoughts. We will probably do a couple of breakout rooms just because I do believe that there is knowledge in this room, and I want to make sure you learn from each other as well as from me and from all of us. So that's kind of what we're planning to do. I have been in the nonprofit sector my whole career, 25 plus years. I've been an executive director, I've been a major gift officer, I've worked across the different sectors, and recently actually moved to Walla Walla. So I'm now in Walla Walla, Washington. I'm getting to know more rural philanthropy as well. So I am, again, really excited to have been partnered with the Community Foundation last year and again this year. And a little bit about the Ostara Group. We work with different nonprofit organizations all over the region and helping them build their organizational capacity, their leadership. And really, most importantly, is just making sure you're ready. Right now is a very difficult time to fundraise. So we work on campaigns, development, grants, and strategy and facilitation. That's a little bit about what we do. But most importantly, philanthropy, the word means love of humankind. So when we think about philanthropy, that's the root of the word. And so it's an opportunity for us to really connect with people and giving them the opportunity to engage. And I think right now, especially, people really want to engage. They want to feel like they are part of something. They want to give back. Now, we know that people might be giving less and or supporting less organizations, but it doesn't change that they want to be engaged in the organizations that they are connected with. And so most importantly is thinking about that on an annual cycle and thinking about how do we connect and communicate with donors regularly so that it's not just a one-time thing. So that once they enter into us, our system, there is then a way for us to communicate with them ongoing, but to be thinking about it all in terms of love of humankind. So when I think about giving, I oftentimes start here just as a context setter, because the Giving USA study, which happens every year, came out in April, May for last year's giving. And it's important to just note that I show this because a majority of gifts come from individuals. So when we think about the donor cycle, a lot of what I'll be talking about is connected to individuals, but I also want to caveat by saying, oftentimes foundations have individuals behind and connect them. Obviously, Melissa, Mindy, right? They have teams of people. Corporations have individuals connected to them in terms of corporate giving strategies. And so, but if you think about where philanthropy comes from and who is giving the most money, it's individuals. And so when I think about where you spend your time and where you ask your board spend their time, I want you to be thinking about it from the perspective of individuals. And so foundations, about 17%, bequests are about 9%, which, as we know, bequests come from individuals. And so therefore, roughly 71% of this total pie of that 449 billion given to philanthropy in our sector came from individuals. And then you think about this, there's a bunch of data, right? So I'm just sharing the highlights of it, but then you can decide where the sectors and where the money went. And so oftentimes and always in the history that I've been working with this study and kind of following it, religion and education are always the biggest. So in terms of percent of that $449 billion, 29% to religion, 14% to education, and you can see along down the way in terms of how that money is given. Now, it's definitely got a bunch of, if you go to givingusa.org, that link, you can download sort of a free kind of high level report because it's interesting to sort of follow and see how things have changed over the years. But even through really down times like 2008, through the early 90s, through our recessions, giving has continued to go up. Now, it has not gone up dramatically, but people still continue to give. And so important to just remember that during these times. So when I think about the donor engagement process and what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the why, because if you don't have a why, why should people give to you, right? What is your why, your organizational why? What do you do? What is your mission? What is your impact? And being able to articulate that. And then you've got to have a who, right? So I have some suggestions on different segments. You'll hear me oftentimes talk about personalization and segmentation because it's really important to think about our who separately in terms of different buckets, right? And we'll talk more about what I mean by that. And then the how, right? So you've got so many different ways that you can raise money. You can do phone calls, you can do text, you can have events, you can do letters, and keeping kind of a mix of those, especially right now, is really important. And then, as I said, the personalize and segment piece, and along with repeating that process. So the one thing that's really interesting about the engagement process with a donor is that the goal actually is to formalize something that our donors get used to. Now, that being said, it repeats itself, right? And so thinking about it from the aspect of your story might change, but you generally are always going to participate, say, in Giving Tuesday, or you're always going to do an end of year appeal, or you're always going to do something first of the year. You're going to have an event. And so the idea of making that regular, making that consistent, is actually a really good thing in your annual donor engagement process, because donors will expect that. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually really good, because they know what to expect from you. Now, for us, we have to think about what those messages are, because those need to change and maybe develop over time. But in terms of the process, something to think about. So when I think about the organization, that why, really thinking about your needs and your impact, right? What is critical to your mission? What are those critical aspects of your mission? For right now, where are you changing your services? What does that look like, to use that word we've all been using a lot, but how does it look like to be nimble, right? How have you pivoted? What does it look like before COVID? What does it look like now? And how are you changing services? I think organizations right now that are being creative and innovative about how they're delivering their services and then telling that story to donors in that why is really important. Where are you seeing the growth? Many of our organizations are seeing growth, right? Especially if you're the social services, human services, healthcare. I mean, many of our organizations are seeing growth. And so being able to articulate and connect that growth to your needs and your impact, your why, is really important. And then where are you meeting need? So where are you seeing success, right? Where, because of your organization, are people's lives better? Is your impact showing? And think about that story. And then, of course, where's the unmet need, right? Because oftentimes unmet need can connect to a great place for people to give their funds. When you think about things that are not happening because you need funds. So I encourage, and those of you who've spent time with me in past workshops, I don't want you to do these things by yourself, right? You, whether you're a board member or you're a staff member, or you're a volunteer, the opportunity to fundraise and to engage people is much more beyond just you, which means I want you to find a person or a couple people, a team, that you can talk with about this. So, for example, sitting down with someone in the next week or so, walking through these questions and see what others might say, see what you say, and then do a comparison. And then that helps you really articulate right now what your needs and your impact are. So thinking about, as you're writing some notes down today, who's on your team, right? In terms of, is it a board member? Is it another staff member? But who, and I don't need it to be a big team. I just want you to have a couple people that you can, talk with about all these different pieces, especially right now, because it'd be pretty lonely sitting at home, fundraising by ourselves. I mean, it's nice to have a team. So why? So most importantly in the donor engagement cycle is the why. And so thinking about it from the aspect of right now, what's most important to us and how are we sharing that story? Any questions, thoughts on the why? Has it become clearer? And you can use the chat, feel free. Has the why become clearer or less clear in your organization during COVID? I'm just curious in terms of what you're experiencing. You can use the chat or you can come off mute, whichever you want to do. I'd love to know if your mission and your impact and your why is more clear because of COVID, or is it less clear? Melanie?
I believe, so I work for Child Care Action Council, and our organization is, we just do everything early learning. And what we're seeing with childcare right now, with so many childcare businesses going out of business, 40 to 50% of childcare businesses are expected to go out of business. And within that, it has ripple effects throughout our entire industry. And yes, our why is definitely heightened because of COVID-19.
Yeah. Thanks, Melanie. And Brianna says more as well. We've really increased in numbers served. Definitely, right? So definitely, most importantly then to articulate what that is, Melanie, right? Definitely. Marge, do you have a thought? Oh, you were off mute. Now you're on mute again. There you are.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yep.
Well, I teach kindergarten to my 5-year-old granddaughter on a Chromebook, so everything's different
Right,
on a
right.
computer. Um, you know, I work with Rebuilding Together, and we do critical home repairs.
Yep.
And with people staying in more and more and confined, we've just had the phone ringing off the hook for critical repairs, you know, furnaces, water heaters, um, mold, anything to make us safe and healthy. Um, and ramps, we're getting tons of ramps that
Oh,
are
interesting.
roofs, which we can't afford to meet roof needs now because it's about $10,000 a house and we don't have the money.
Yeah.
But the why is evidently very clear.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, your why is connected very clearly. A person has heat or they don't. They have plumbing or they don't. They have a ramp or they don't, right? So that's a very clear. Thank you for sharing
Just
that.
a little story, very short.
Yeah.
An 81-year-old disabled veteran, former Green Beret, lives here. His daughter lives in Raymond and she's disabled, and he didn't have water for 6 months. So she was bringing him water twice a week from Raymond before we went and got a water heater. And,
Wow.
you know, so I mean, that's the kind of need that's out there.
Wow. Wow. Thanks. Emily, you have a thought?
Yeah, we're most of our fundraising is around environmental education programs, and that's been a real challenge in terms of both people, you know, expressing there's a need and a desire to get outside and have kids do stuff that's real and engaging and hands-on, but our normal programs are so disrupted by school closures and how overwhelmed teachers are, and it's been hard to kind of figure out what we're asking for in terms of, you know, anything concrete besides saying like we're trying and we're trying to adapt and support you in doing the education that we want to always do.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you bring up a good point, Emily, because I think there's a why for now and there's a why for the future. And I think for some organizations, articulating what that looks like in the future is really important. And so that, you know, I think this recovery period is going to be long, right? Like the tidal wave is still building. And so that's what I'm reading, that's what I'm hearing. And so when I think about organizations like yours, Emily, or Marge, or Melanie, whoever, you're all going to be involved in part of this for the future, right? So what does the future look like, and how can we prepare for now and also plan for the future and tell those stories so that people can think about giving, so that you're going to be prepared, right? So what does that look like and how do you articulate that? So thanks for sharing, Emily. So this is you know, I went to the Indiana University School of Philanthropy a long time ago. And this pyramid was something that we looked at, and I've always thought about it because it starts to really help you think about who your who is. So for example, you've got your first time donors at the bottom of the base, and I call them out because think about right now, if someone is choosing you over another organization, they're choosing you. So in terms of a donor engagement cycle, how are we treating our first time donors? Are we getting on the phone right away and calling them and saying thank you? Right? I'm working with a couple organizations right now where that is what solely board members are doing right now. They're just calling new donors and they're just calling to say thank you. And sometimes they're asking, you know, why did you choose us? We'd love to know. Just, that's great information. Did they see you somewhere? Did they talk to someone? Are they just really connected and care about the cause? So first time donors, a great group to steward. Habitual donors. So those are the people that are giving you multiple gifts, right? They're giving you a couple times a year. They're giving more than once, but they continue to give to you. And then you've got thoughtful donors. And I don't put numbers. You'll see there's no numbers on here, right? Because each organization is different. So thoughtful to me is when you can see that someone maybe went from $50 to $100 or $100 to $250. And the reality is they just decided to invest in you more, right? And so they sort of moved up that threshold in the way in terms of their relationship with you. Then somewhere along the way, there's this line where people cross into being major donors. And so they are people maybe who give for your organization $500 or more, $1,000 or more. Some organizations it's $20,000 or more. But just knowing for your organization kind of who's in each of these categories, it's a beginning to think about who the who is in your organization. And then at the top of the pyramid is the legacy donors, right? Those are the people that have chosen to leave you in their planned giving vehicles. Their bequests, maybe insurance, maybe retirement accounts. But I always bring up legacy donors, especially for you all that work for organizations that have long histories. And so whether it's 10 years, 15, 20 years plus, when you have giving history that goes back that far, legacy and planned giving is something I want you to really think about in terms of your annual cycle with donors. And so oftentimes what I recommend is running a report of someone who's giving you a gift of any amount. And I really mean that, $5, $10, $100, but consecutively, right? So Melanie gave $50 to us for the last 20 years. That means every year Melanie has chosen us. There's something there. There's a conversation to have. And so that's a group that there's definitely a specific planned giving strategy for. And it doesn't have to be complicated, but the idea being you just want to know who those people are, right? Because our communication with them, our stewardship with them, that's an audience that I want you to think about, is those consecutive year donors. Because when you think about planned giving and you think about legacy, who do people leave in their estate plans? Leave their family, right? And so if an organization chooses you, your organization, they're looking at you like your family. And so how do we treat them? How do we bring them in, recognize them, knowing some people don't care. They don't want to be recognized, and that's okay. But we'd love to know just so that we can have record. So I share this sort of with you in terms of beginning to think about your who, because we got your why, right? We know your impact, we're working on that. Now I want you to spend a little bit of time with your data thinking about who your who is. And thinking about, on the right side of this, the cultivation time is invested the further you go up. And so when you think about major donors and legacy donors, you probably would spend more time with them than you would, say, with a first-time donor. Now, everybody's included in a stewardship plan, everybody gets thanked, but the idea of who you spend more time with just moves up as you go up the pyramid. And so digging down a little bit further. So a suggestion, one of the things that I've done to help organizations is basically list out on the x-axis of an Excel sheet these categories, okay? First-time donors, lapsed donors, loyal donors, on down the list. And then across the y-axis, different activities that happen, whether it be a newsletter or an event or a phone call from a board member or a thank you letter from a staff member. And then what I like to do is just create a matrix of sorts, just to see who you're communicating with on an annual basis. The most, the least, targeted. And that starts to sort of, again, really look at who your specific who is, right? And these are just the categories that I would suggest that you can start with. Brianna, can you talk about what that time looks like beyond thank yous? Sure. We're going to get to that, Brianna. Give me a couple minutes. We're going to get to just talking about cultivation in general, different activities and what that looks like. So I will come back to that. But I think for the most part, thinking about this is where that segmentation comes into play. And you're thinking about these different audience groups and thinking about it from the aspect of, for you all, you might just choose to focus on 4, right? So I know the list is long. I know the list can be overwhelming. And so part of what I always encourage, and Melissa and I were talking about this before y'all got on, just pick what's doable right now, right? What feels good? Who do you have the best relationships right now with? If it's your corporate donors, keep them on the list. If it's your legacy donors, keep them on the list. But just pick a few of these audience segments to really build out your full donor cycle for, right? So again, talked about the why, this is the who, and we're going to get into talking about the how and then the what, how we raise money from people. Are there any categories that you see missing that you include? Now, again, I know some of you might have parents, certainly, if you're in education. And again, I would sort of think about it from the aspect of sort of who are your primary audiences, who are your secondary audiences, and who are your tertiary audiences, right? Who are your different groups that all stay connected to you? So I'm curious if you see any others, big ones that are missing, or that you have that you might want to share. and you can share or chat, whichever works best for you. Okay. And often just times, it depends on how you define loyal, more than one time in the past year. So Megan, oftentimes with loyal, I think people begin loyal, prospect donors. That's a great one, Nikki. I would look at loyal, in my experience, as probably 5 years plus. Oftentimes, I would even go back to 3. So when I think about donors that have chosen us 3 times in a row, 3 years in a row, they're beginning, I think, to become loyal. And if we're doing our job thanking them, and we're doing our job bringing them closer, that's the part where I think that loyalty factor starts to come. Great. Prospects, donors, excellent. Any others that you see? Okay. All right, so the how. So when I think about behaviors, this is what internal staff, Frank, that's great. Yeah, definitely. Having your internal stakeholders as an audience as well. You know, and I think it's so good that you brought that up, Frank, because I think sometimes we forget about internal staff, and we also forget about board members sometimes as donors, right? Because board members are board members because they're volunteering and they're governance, but the reality is they're oftentimes some of your greatest donors, true? So they have multiple hats, so great one to include in there. Thanks, Frank. So multiplicity, right? So multiplicity is the different multiple places they're giving in your organization, right? Programs that they support, right? So they might really care about your food bank program, but they also care about your weekend kids for food. They might care about your home delivery, but they have multiple interests with your organization, okay? That's something to key in on, right? So when you get to know donors, where do they care about your organization? Then thinking about frequency, right? Are they in that habitual donor category? Are they giving more than one time a year? What does that look like in terms of their frequency? And then also recency, right? How recent did they give? Did they give in the last year? Did they give in the last 2 years? And so, you know, again, we'll talk a little bit and we get into sort of some specifics around right now. You know, October 1 started the busiest giving quarter of the year, right? The most money is given to nonprofits between October and December 31st. And oftentimes organizations actually meet their annual fund goals during this quarter. And so when I think about, wow, how we've been building and what's been happening through the pandemic, through the race reckoning, through all the other different pieces of our, you know, missions that are supporting what's going on in our world right now. You know, Emily talked about environment, right? People are seeking respite outside. I think about animals. People are, I mean, how many of your friends or maybe yourselves have adopted a dog or a cat, right? I keep meeting brand new cats and dogs in my friends' families. It's great. But when you think about, we're all connected to this, to the world right now in a different way. And so how we communicate that is really important. But just knowing that the end of the year coming up here, we're going to talk a little more specifically about that because it's a great time to connect in the donor cycle, always. And then I talked about engagement channels, right? So you have many different channels. You know, the in-person's kind of gone away a little bit, which is always the best way to raise money from people. But we've brought in Zoom. We've brought back the phone in some cases. People are home, so they're answering their phone. People are getting texts. People are going online to social media. People are getting emails. People are getting letters. And so again, thinking about for your organization, what are the best engagement channels, right? And I go back to your who, right? How are those people giving? And then if you can, the best way to do it is to target the way someone's given to them. Now, I know when I talk about personalization and segmentation, it takes a lot of time, right? And what I'll tell you is if you can carve out some pieces to really focus on, then you're going to be more successful. And what I mean by that is if you can carve out some targeted audiences, people that, for example, people that gave to you last year who haven't given to you this year. Right now, that's the group in the cycle that I want you to be thinking about. I want you to run a list of anybody who gave in 2018 who hasn't yet, or 19, who hasn't yet given to you in 2020. That's the group between now and the end of the year And I want you to look, did they give through email? Did they give through phone? Did they give through mail? And if there's a way to ask them in the way that they've given to you in the past, that's the best. Now, it's not always ideal. You don't always have enough time to do that, but there is a way to sort of think about that specific audience. Okay, so when we think about the cycle, and this is Brianna, where I'm going to talk a little bit and would love your feedback. We're actually going to go into a quick breakout room. Is there's cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. And this is the cycle by which we live and have relationships with donors. So there's an engagement cycle, of course, that we think about time, right? Which is what we were talking about, the year. And then these are the different stages. So when I say 60%, what I mean by that is that you spend about 60% of your time with donors in cultivation. And that's when you get to know their values, beliefs, and experiences. And so what I mean by that is they're getting the newsletter. These are the non-ask events, right? It's getting an email newsletter. It's getting a phone call just to check in to say hello. It's getting a birthday card. You're inviting them to a virtual coffee chat with one of your program staff or your executive director. There's many different ways in which we're spending 60% of our time with donors and there's no ask. Then 10% is the ask, right? So that's the email, that's the phone call, that's the letter, whatever that might be. But 10% of our relationship is with donors in the solicitation stage. And then 30% is stewardship. And what stewardship, how it's different from cultivation, is it's sharing the story of impact. So it's what your gift accomplished, right? So I can think about it for Marge, right? If someone were helpful in making that water happen for that disabled vet, then we're going back and telling that story and we're sharing how that gift accomplished that. But that might not be specific, but it's a story that describes the impact of your mission. And so using stewardship in a way that really gives people an idea of what their gift accomplished. And that's what brings people back around into cultivation and then through the cycle again. And so when I think about the donor cycle on the annual cycle, I'm thinking about it with these three lenses as well. What are we doing that's not an ask, that we're just bringing them closer? Where are our asks in our calendar? And then where are we just doing stewardship, right? Are there opportunities for us to just bring people together to talk about what we've accomplished and to be thinking through the cycle in this way? So again, these are just a few little examples, right? Your annual report, right? Whether you do a mail version or you do an email version. A lot of people are doing infographics now. I mean, any way that communicates sort of how your mission is accomplishing the work that you're doing, sharing that. Virtual coffees. I've been working with many organizations who've just been doing kind of this window between 10 and 10:45, and they're just inviting groups of donors to come. And this specific client is doing it with the executive director. And it's just and you know, Brianna, I think about you said your numbers are going up. I don't know exactly what organization you're in, but a cultivation event for you and the time, when you talk about that cultivation time, wild grief. Okay. So thinking about why are your numbers going up and how can you communicate that with donors in a way that says thank you and encourages them to give more. But I think people right now, and the reason this client is doing their food bank is because their numbers are skyrocketing. Right? And so they're just and they're having a lot of new donors. So they're basically doing new donor coffees to invite people to just come and ask questions of the executive director. And they might get 10, they might get 15 people out of, they've had tons of new donors. But again, the offer of including it is important. Birthday cards, right? Lunch with the ED. I mean, you used to be able to do that in person. We could share lunch together over Zoom. But the newsletters that you do, I mean, there's a ton of different opportunities for you. What's the agenda for that? It's mostly Q&A. So Brianna, it's basically get on at 10. It's through Zoom. Do sort of a quick introduction, sort of, what's been your favorite food or drink during the pandemic, kind of an icebreaker of sort. People will share that in the chat. Then the executive director just introduces herself and starts with a thank you, right away. And then has a really short program, probably like 5 to 10 minutes of just, again, what are we seeing? What is changing with our needs? Why do we think that's happening? What we're hearing from the clients and the people that we work with. And then really quickly moves to a question and answer. So it's just, again, time spent, and we're finding that, 10 to 10:45, people can get up, they've been doing some work, they can sit down at their computer, and they can join a quick conversation. So that's really been what it's looked like. So what I will talk about next is thinking about things in quarters, right? And what I'll also, some of you who joined me when we talked about like raising time, now do we do? I think a quarter is all we can really think about. I think we don't know what it's going to look like in January. We don't know what it's going to look like next spring. And so again, I think having a kind of a general plan for what you're going to do on the annual cycle is really important, but I would think about things by the quarter, right? So right now, Q4, end of year, right? That's a big thing for y'all to focus on. Looking at all those people who gave you last year, who haven't yet given this year, those are the people I want you to focus on. Then what's going to happen in Q1, and work through that in terms of your activities, right? So what doesn't change, right, is your why, which we started with. Then you have your who, and then your how, which we've talked about, can be events, can be letters, can be different vehicles in which we're asking people to give. And so thinking through your fundraising activities by quarter and thinking about it from the aspect of, are we asking enough? Are we not asking enough? And thinking about it also not just from our asks in that solicitation bucket, but add in some cultivation and some stewardship activities. So Q1, what are our cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship activities? And just be thinking about that now, right? Q2, put out there, start to think about it. You're really executing on Q4 right now. You're starting to plan for Q1. I know a lot of us had development plans. Maybe they were 1 year, 2 year. I don't know. Some of us are using those right now. More often than not, they're refining, right? And we're pulling out things that are the most important. And also knowing that donor acquisition right now is tough, right? Getting new donors, that's why I bring up new donors way back in the who, because if new donors are choosing you, grab them into the family right now. Make sure you're saying thank you. Make sure they're seeing what your impact is, because then they will become a recurring donor, and then eventually they'll become a loyal donor, right? And so the better job we can do to capture them is really important. Any thoughts, questions on sort of this thinking about things by quarter? Trying to break it down a little bit, because I know I'm overwhelmed sometimes right now. I think it's better to be thinking focused, but I'm curious how you all are approaching it. So what I want to do is, Melissa, I think we'll do 2 groups. We've got, how many people we have? About 13. Okay. So we're gonna do 2 groups. And here's again what I really do believe this. I believe we're peers. We're in this together, right? And so we're gonna split you up just for about 5 minutes, and I want you to talk about how you've shifted your fundraising strategy. And I want you to talk about, what are you doing in cultivation? Are you doing mostly letters? Are you doing emails? How are you doing your solicitation? And then what's your stewardship look like right now? Have you increased your stewardship? Have you been forgetting about it? And oh my gosh, now we need to do it. So my hope is, in the groups, you're going to share your successes. You're going to share your challenges. And again, my hope, you come out with an idea, right? You just need one. And you're here to learn from each other. And so, Melissa, I think we'll split people into the groups, and then we'll come back, and I'd love to hear your ideas.
So give me just a second.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah.
The other thing, as Melissa's doing this, there's no judge. I'm in a no judgment zone always with people. If you are like, oh my gosh, we haven't been doing this, or we need to do this, that's fine. There's always a time to start it, right? And there's always a time to reboot it. And so I think, again, while you're here for this hour and a half today, you've taken time to focus on you, to focus on your organization. And, you know, my hope is you do walk away with 1 or 2 ideas that sort of refreshes how you think about this annual cycle.
All right, if everyone's ready.
To zoom away, and then we'll
Yeah.
bring it back.
Right. Everyone should have received a little option that says to join breakout room. There they go. All right, I'm gonna go pop into their rooms really quick to go and put the question in the chat box.
And then I've got a 1:43, so we'll. Oh.
I have it set to have them send back automatically. I think I put 6 minutes.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Okay.
All right, I'll be back in just a second.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. I'm gonna run to the restroom. I'll be right back.
All right, sounds good. Hi all, I'm just gonna go ahead and put the questions in the chat box really quick.
Thanks.
Let me go ahead and assign it to everyone so everyone gets to see it. There we go, perfect. All right, so yeah, there's a timer going up at the top, and once the timer counts down, it'll just kind of kick everyone back into the main room.
Great.
All right, I'll see y'all there.
Been the priority, or just trying to keep active with programming has been my main focus.
I will write the prompt. I took a photo of it.
Oh, I actually was just coming in here to post it in the chat.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Well,
yeah, I was
Melissa,
just
you
sneaking
can
into
post
that.
it, and I will read it out loud. How about that?
Yeah.
What shifts in fundraising strategies have you made?
Hello.
Oh, there it goes. All right, got it all posted in there for everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So I'm looking at your questions. So how to improve donor engagement. We're talking about that. How to create sustainable plan, effective onboard donor engagement. More about fundraising. How to get and keep donors. How to best engage. Yeah, starting to engage is corporate. Group insights. More virtual focused engagement options. Again, we talked about that a little bit. You know what I'm going to do really quick? Actually, can I send you a link, 2 links that I can have you put in?
The chat box.
In the chat box? Okay, hang on just a second. Let me get that.
Oh, I mean, is that where you want me to post it?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll post it when everyone comes back so they'll be able to hopefully see it.
There are 2 that will go probably, in fact, what I'll do is I'll say, Melissa, will you put that link in the chat?
Sounds good.
This one actually is specific to corporate donors.
I was gonna say, do you want to also send me that link for at the very beginning when we were talking about
USA?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I couldn't remember what it was. I was like, I'll have to check it later.
There we go. So those are so. I'll tell you when to post those other 2 when we get to the event part. Right. Then, sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Perfect. So far, so good though. Anything, advice, thoughts?
No, I think so far so good.
Okay.
I think it's been good with making sure to kind of go over a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I know, like, there's several of the comments was, asking about mostly you know, kind of like new ways to engage with, you know, like the new kind of,
Yeah.
what was the one with virtual focused engagement options?
Yep.
But you've been covering some of that as well, so.
And that's where when we come back, and then we'll talk about events and event ideas. When we get to this one,
Perfect.
and that one that's the Bloomerang article, you can put in the
Oh,
chat.
okay.
And that is a full on awesome, like, we'll talk about different virtual event ideas. And when I say event, I mean small and big, right? And I'll kind of talk
Right.
about that. And then we'll talk about this. And then what are we doing? 1:40. We're doing good on time. So I would like to do another quick breakout and talk about events, because I think that it's really dialed, and they can talk about annual events and little events, big events, and then we can bring them back. Does that sound good?
Right. No, that sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Great. Okay.
Oh, yeah, so it's got about 20 seconds left. So,
What
it
do
should
you
be
say?
back soon. It says the breakout rooms have about 20 seconds left.
Oh, sweet. Perfect time.
So, should be sending them back soon.
Awesome.
All right. Bringing them back.
Coming back. I love little when they like appear. I think that's so fun.
Apparently now it's sending it to them. All breakout rooms will close in 50 seconds. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's
Nice.
right.
Yeah,
Gives
Ice Rita has that little buffer for the finished last thoughts.
I know. Totally.
I hate being in some of those ones where like you don't get that little buffer.
I know. It's like,
Yeah, you just get cut off mid-sentence and you're like, wait, what? You're like, no.
seriously. Like, I was in the middle of the best thought ever.
Right. But sometimes, you know, that's something that I wish we had like in person, you know,
I
meetings. You wish you could just kind of like, boom, everyone's done. You don't have to wait, you know, for everyone to stop talking.
I know. I know, it's hard. Because you do in person, you get a little bit more grace, right? And like,
It's fair.
having to finish up your
Right.
thought, all of that. So.
Ta-da. Welcome back.
Excellent. To everybody back? Looks like it. Okay. So I'd love to hear what you talked about. Just a couple thoughts, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us, either successes or challenges. If you did get a new idea, what's the new idea you walked away with?
I feel like we need a little more time to dig in, because we were each like 30 seconds, here's the highlights. But I'd say like the thing I'm intrigued by is multiple people doing the virtual events, and like how that, you know, and a lot of experimenting, which is kind of a neat thing. People are innovating and experimenting right now.
Great. And a little preview, Brianna, we're going to go back into break rooms and actually talk a little bit more specifically about events. And so we'll give you a little bit more time too. I appreciate that.
That would be awesome.
Any other thoughts?
I have one question. It wasn't discussed at the breakout room, but one of the challenges we're having is, like you said, we have a kind of a consistent year, you know, events, and then our appeal campaigns and a regular schedule we've had for, I don't know, 10 or more years. And then with COVID, we had to kind of shift a big fundraising event closer to our year-end appeal. And I'm just wondering if people are anticipating kind of when that happens, if there's a big impact on that year-end giving, or kind of any kind of, I guess we don't know yet, but.
Yeah, that's a great question, Nikki. So though I'm working actually, gosh, I have 3 clients right now. Actually, I have their virtual events in the next 2 weeks. And so, and I'm also working with them on their end of year campaign. And so what we're doing is we're waiting to see who comes to the event, who gives at the event, And then what we'll do is if they've sort of made their gift, and what I mean by that kind of in quotes is it's, if you look at what they gave last year and it's about what they give, then what we'll do is we'll take them out of that year-end appeal. And so now if they may, you know, let's just say the people who RSVP'd and they didn't come to the event, then certainly those people, what I would do is loop them into your year-end appeal. And I'd have probably a segment for them that says, we missed you at the event. Here's the link. Here's, you know, whatever you have from your event that you potentially share digitally with them.
Right.
I would utilize that and segment that group in your year-end campaign.
Yeah.
And things like, you know, Giving Tuesday, which comes right the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. You know, I like utilizing that as part of your year-end campaign and using that solely sort of focused on social media, maybe email. And so, for example, if someone came to your event and then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later is Giving Tuesday, I don't worry about that mix, right? Because there's what I consider sort of push and pull media and asks. And Giving Tuesday to me is that one that's on your social media that might be an email to remind people, but it's not their ask, right? It's not that specific, Nikki, would you renew your gift of $250 this year, right?
Right.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, very.
Okay, great. Any other questions that came up or anything else? We have a couple minutes and then we'll move along. But I want to make sure you walk away with, if you had questions, if there's anything that's percolating. Okay, well, if there is, please raise your hand, come off mute, put in the chat. Okay, so when we're thinking about event ideas, right? So, and when I talk about event ideas, I'm talking the big annual events, I'm talking about those coffee chats, I'm talking about those different event ideas. And so often right now people have canceled, right? You're considering canceling, you've postponed, you've repurposed, you might have done all of these, right? And are in the next cycle of doing this. You know, one of the things I'm hearing is, you know, most people are not planning for in-person until probably next summer, maybe next fall, right? I also have seen a bunch of hybrid happening and being thought about. And what I mean by that is maybe 5 or 10 people in person together, socially distant, safe, and then something virtually. And so, you know, depending on what your event is, depending on who your audience is, there could be a way to develop something hybrid where there's maybe a board member hosting a few people or something like that in a small setting. It's still an event, but it's not a big event. So, Melissa, you can put that Bloomerang link in the chat. So I'm seeing some really, really crazy fun ideas, right? Obviously the online gala, and we're seeing that in different ways. The link that Melissa's putting in the chat is a Bloomerang, which is a database blog, and they have this whole article on virtual fundraising ideas. Now, and it's, when I mean fundraising ideas, I mean, it's not just event ideas, right? And so what I'm seeing are the virtual 5Ks, I'm seeing virtual cooking nights, right? Where you have a relationship with a chef and they are doing, they send the recipe and the ingredients to your audience, and then your audience pulls up and you do appetizers together. I'm seeing virtual cocktail classes, right? Where you can send a group of people or deliver a group of people like the ingredients for a cocktail, and then you have a cocktail mixologist teaching a cocktail class. I've seen book clubs, right? Just virtual book clubs. So your mission, your impact, is there a book that's connected to it? Maybe ask people to read the book and then come on and have a virtual conversation about it. Speaker series, right? Maybe a quarterly speaker series that just, again, right now, people want connection. Yes, people are getting Zoom fatigue. I'm getting Zoom fatigue. We're all getting Zoom fatigue. But the reality is, if you care about something enough to give your resources to, you're going to join, right? And I think that, again, rather than that angst of us saying, I don't want to participate anymore, give your donors the choice, right? Give your donors the choice, but give them the opportunity to join. you're doing a virtual campfire and working to set on a paper campfire. Oh, I love that. That's so fun. That is great. I have last week I participated. So I sit on the WSU Foundation Board of Trustees, and we had a virtual wine tasting, and it was really cool. And it was just 30 minutes. I mean, again, this wasn't like an hour and a half thing. It was 30 minutes with the winemaker. We had one white, we had one red. I happen to live in Walla Walla now, so I picked up my wine, but they would have shipped it to me if I wouldn't have been here. And we also had cheese pairing suggestions, right? But it was fun. And I think, think about who your local chefs are in your community. Think about who your local wine stores are. People, those local businesses who would love an invitation to come and be with a certain group of your audience. But take a look at that Boomerang articles. I really enjoy kind of some of the ideas on there. The other thing is thinking about it from this lens, right? We're taking our event to our people. And so, letters and emails to event attendees. So Nikki, another thing I'm seeing done well is if you had an event last year, you're doing it virtually this year. If you're still in enough advance of the event, sending a pre-letter to everybody that went last year saying, we're not going to be together in person. We are going to be together virtually. Rebecca, would you consider making your $100 gift again this year, right? And so again, that idea of so they're still doing the virtual event. I can either join or not, but I'm asked to give, right? So I think that pairing, again, that multi-channel is really important. What's the ideal time for a virtual breakfast event? So I think an hour, Marge. I think, I was an hour in and out. I participated in the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank, did a really great one last week, Marge, and it was a breakfast, and they also did a lunch, and it was 1 hour. And they used the Remo. Is anybody familiar with or heard about that platform? It's Remo, R-E-M-O. Frank's shaking his head. So it was super cool. I got in, and they have virtual tables where you can click on a table and land in that table and then work together on the screen. And then you can come out and you can go in another table. So they had levels. I mean, it was very, very cool. So I definitely, in time of day for the virtual breakfast, it was 8, I would say 8 to 9, that idea. It's Megan or Melissa, can you look up maybe Remo and see what comes up and then put that in the chat? And then QIQO chat is somewhere where you choose a room. Oh, cool. Okay, that's great. Any others that people have? I'd love to know. I mean, I have a whole virtual file right now that I'm keeping, and I'm going to share a few more in a minute. There it is, remo.co. Peer-to-peer toolkits, right? If you've had table captains in the past, I want you to keep your table captains. I want you to make them virtual, with virtual hosts. I'm working with a client right now. And they're doing kind of a 20s theme. And so we've got creative, and we're calling their table captains the Bee's Knees, which the Bee's Knees is a cocktail from that time. And so they're part of the Bee's Knees Club, right? It's just something fun and creative that you can do. And so we are putting together a little toolkit for them, and I have suggestions on what to put in that in a second. Video your speaker, right? If that's why the recording function, and some people I know are doing live and pre-recorded, right? I think you can do both, but utilizing that to send to your event list, and then you can use that also in other ways throughout your year, your cycle with your donors. If you have a program, I mean, I love the idea of still like Brianna's doing with the campfire kit, but if you have a little program or an invitation, you can still send it, right? The idea of just still sending something to someone so they feel they're getting something in the mail, right? And then calling and talking with your sponsors. So sponsors right now, we have to think of them beyond, in my opinion, just the treasure, the money part of giving. But what else can they do to support the mission? Can they share our event through their marketing and social media channels, right? Can they give their time and some of the help with something else? Maybe they'll donate something. But the idea is a lot of our sponsors, you know, they're having to choose too, right? I mean, their budgets are shrinking. So I think calling your sponsors and just having a conversation with them, and I'm seeing it across the board. I'm seeing new sponsors come in because they like the virtual platforms and they have a bigger virtual reach. And then I'm seeing sponsors that are lessening. I've heard some that aren't giving, and those are the ones that are probably really, you know, really challenging with their business, keeping people employed and that type of thing. But that sponsor is the one that still might have a marketing channel that maybe they'll help us market, right? So just having a conversation with your sponsors. Melissa, that's the other article that I sent you is about sort of sponsorship thank yous. And there's a wonderful woman by the name of Julia Campbell. She's out of Boston, and she does some great work around social media and how to communicate digitally. And she had this, you know, how to thank your corporate sponsors virtually. And so Melissa just put it in the chat. It's a great article. It's pretty simple. And just, you know, a suggestion for you in terms of how to engage those sponsors. But more than anything, with anyone right now, just engage. We care about people as humans. We care about gifts at any level. And we want to make sure and know that the people who can't give us what they gave last year right now, it doesn't mean they don't care about us, right? It doesn't mean they're not going to come back next year. So how do we keep them in that cycle and with us, more in cultivation or more in stewardship? So these are a few. Obviously, I'm seeing a lot of online auctions. I am seeing mobile, you know, mobile bidding sites. I've seen 2 events actually recently that did a text to give. So they were doing their virtual event, and they were talking about the fact that you could text to give. And the host virtually, that was part of her script, right? She said, you know, and she did it kind of throughout, which I think is interesting because if you think about when we're in the room together, there's a program, right? And there's a real intentional ask, and we know when it's coming and we know when it's over. The thing I liked about this virtual is they didn't overdo it, but they started with just, you know, we're here to raise money for this, and here's the way you give. And then they interspersed with some mission and some stories, and then they said, again, we're here to give. So here's the text to give again. Here's the link to our website. And then more engagement, and then another ask. And they did a really good job. And I liked that because generally in the in-person format, people come on time and they leave, right? But we've noticed in the virtual format, just because it's more flexible, people will come in and they might leave, or they might come in, right? And so I liked the ongoing ask, which I thought was great. These are just some sites that I've seen that I think are great in terms of, and I've had clients use them. They generally have the peer-to-peer piece. They generally have the back end to give piece. They have the Give Butter, which I think is hilarious, that name, but Give Butter has a whole peer-to-peer. I have a client who just did a virtual walk on that platform. So people could go in, they could create their own walk teams. So, you know, there's a lot of really interesting, I think, innovation right now in these platforms, and they're really listening to clients, to you all, if and when you need something. And then of course there's different platforms for events, Facebook Live, YouTube, Zoom. And then what I would also just tell you is I don't think it has to, I've seen some that are super fancy that have gone all out, and I have seen some that are literally like we are now together in a Zoom room, and there's a couple speakers and there's an ask, and it's just as moving, right? And again, it is not ever about the event. It is about what the dollars raised from the event accomplish. It's about bringing people closer to your mission. And so that format, it needs to fit you as an organization. And so just, I think I can see, just because I've been doing this for 25 years, there's going to be the, oh my gosh, well, we're not doing this, or we're not incorporating this component. Don't fall to that urge. Just do what works for you all, do what works best for your organization, and your donors will appreciate that. That's the most important thing, is to be real to who you all are. Here's some options for the peer-to-peer toolkit. So a frequently asked questions, kind of a timeline of the event. Is it like a 1-day thing? Is it a 1 week? But giving people kind of what the timeline of the event looks like. And then the communication templates. Those to me are some of the most important pieces. So giving them phone call scripts, giving them email and letter scripts, giving them social media sample posts, so that if I'm your virtual table captain, you basically giving me all the tools that I need, put it in a Google Doc, put it in a Word doc, and just send it to me, right? And then I can copy and paste and put that into the people. That's the goal, right? Is I put it into my social media, I email it to the people that I know to introduce. And then clearly just some talking points, right? What is that why? What are we raising money for? What is the impact we're trying to have? So I can put that into my story for you as I'm being a champion on your behalf. And then of course, if you can, there's the Facebook frames, right? Like Brianna, I could see a really cool like campfire, fire flame, cool Facebook frame that like anybody who participates in your virtual campfire, they put that little frame around, right? Those are the things that I think getting creative and thinking about, you know, what you can do. The thing that I'll say is virtual events, yes, you still have to have technology. Yes, there's still privilege in being able to have a device, and we're seeing that obviously very clearly in education right now, very, very hard for people that don't have the access. But what I am seeing is that virtual events are lowering the barrier of entrance and access to our organizations. So the person who couldn't come downtown or come to your event at lunch or come to your breakfast in person, they can not be on video, still be in their pajamas, and come sit at their desk or on their phone and join you at your breakfast. And they could invite 10 of their friends who live no longer in your neighborhood or community where you live, but they care about your community. So this idea of reach virtually is something that I'm seeing organizations take advantage of, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I mean that in a how can you leverage your board and your past board and your volunteers and your past volunteers? How can you leverage people that have been close to you to be champions on your behalf for your event, and thinking about it that way. So I think we're going to go back into breakout rooms, Melissa, and I would love for you all to dig in. We'll give you, we're at 2:10. Let's give you, we'll give you 10 minutes, and we'll come back, and then we'll wrap up by 2:30. But 10 minutes, and what I really want you to do is, for those of you who've done events, what have you learned? What do you wish you'd done different? What do you, maybe the platforms you used? I mean, again, this is where I want you to think event, big big E and little e, right? Like the 5-person, you know, coffee chat, and then maybe the run or the gala, whatever you've done. I would love to have you all talk and learn a bit from each other.
And yep, I'm going to send everyone off in just
Okay.
a second. Just a reminder that I am going to pop in again temporarily just to put these questions into the chat box for each breakout session.
Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, great. Oh, hold on just a moment. I lied. Apparently it doesn't like me. Yay, technology.
So I was on a virtual event last week with 400 people nationwide, and technology freaked out. And they did a great job. They just rolled with it. Like, there is nothing we can do. That should be the least of your worries. if you're worried about technology.
All right, so now we should be ready to go. There we go. It should be sending everyone the little option to join. See y'all soon. in. All right, it looks like everyone's back in here. Perfect.
Excellent. Okay, so I would love to hear just a couple snippets. What did you guys talk about? Thoughts? Brianna, Melissa, and I have more ideas for you. One, you could do like little personalized books of matches with your logo that you could send potentially. The other thing, Melissa had a great idea of a little s'mores kit that you could like deliver to people with like their little, so anyway, this is the kind of fun, cool thing that you could do, right? So what did y'all talk about? Share with us.
One of the things that came up in our group was the virtual live rather than pre-recorded.
Yeah.
Definitely pros and cons to having a live event as opposed to the pre-recorded, but the pre-recorded allows you to kind of have a little more control over what's going on and still have a live chat feature so people can really feel like they're interacting live. Tara from Hands On mentioned quite a bit of that, and we're planning to do an event very similar to that at the end of the month.
That's great. That's a really good thing to work through, right? Is what that live to pre-record or record ratio is going to be. But you're right. I like having a live component, right? Because I think it's great to see people. It's good to see people. So that's great. Thanks, Frank. Anybody else? Emily?
We had talked a little bit about how you balance when you have programs that are either self-funding or like you do a specific program fundraiser for programs that we couldn't do this year, like field trips or concerts or whatever. And we had remarkable success moving a small, what we usually did is a silent auction at a restaurant to a virtual auction we did this summer, and adding a requested donation and a speaker feature that weren't usually part of the event, and that we raised, it was a pretty small dollar fundraiser, but we raised like 3 or 4 times what we normally do. Just even though we were telling people this is for a program we can't offer this year, they were still invested in making sure that we could do it when things get back to normal. So it really taught me to make the ask, even when we don't have something to show for it right now.
Yes, 100%. Great. Well, thank you. So that's a good transition. So Emily, Dr. Tim Seiler from the Fundraising School, he did a webinar really early on, and he talked about hope and stability. And that's what people really want and need right now, are hope and stability. The other thing he talked about, Emily, which speaks to what you just said, is if your mission was important and critical before COVID, it is still important and critical now, which means you should still ask. And it's really easy to get in that, or we're not doing our programs, or we're not healthcare, or we're not frontline, or whatever that narrative is in your head. But just go back to the fact that if you were critical before, you're still critical now, which means you still have to ask, right? And people will say no, and that's just what fundraising is, right? The other thing is, what does it look like on the other side, right? What can you dream about? What does it look like? What program do you want to do? What did you learn during this time that you want to do different? How can you build that into something that you ask for funds for? And then ask people to join you, right? Dream big and ask people to join you. Because I think what's most important is we will get through this. There is another side. Don't exactly know when the other side is, but the reality is to keep thinking about what the future looks like, keep thinking about the current need, and take your cycle for the year and think about it from those different aspects of your mission and impact, from your who, from your how are you asking. And really talk and communicate, right? Where's the next great idea? You don't know. Just talk with donors and people and prospects and invite them into the conversation right now. And just remember that relationship-based fundraising takes time. Any kind of engagement cycle takes time. And there's going to be people that continue to lean into it, and there's other people that are not. And that's okay. And right now, what I encourage you to do is just to focus on the people that are there, right? Don't worry about acquiring the new donors. If they come, that's great. Maybe look past a year, last year, bring those people back in, but just really focus on the people that are there and here right now for you. Don't forget to personalize and segment where you can. And another example of that really is, if you have the ability to merge name into a letter, either via snail mail letter or email, I really want you to do that. I want to receive a letter that says, Dear Rebecca. If that's possible, do that. I just received one, I'll tell you, actually from a former client, which I've worked with them for about 7 years, and it said, Dear friend, and it got under my skin a little bit, just because they know who I am, right? And I realize that's a little bit more time to put the mail merge function in, but you know what? When I get something that says Dear Rebecca versus Dear friend, I'm gonna look at it more intently than I am if it's not. So that's a simple personalization thing that I would mention. And then telling the story of impact, right? I really want you to tell that story of impact. What's happening and how is that changing? And then we've got some questions. We've been asking questions along the way, but is there anything else that I could be helpful with, or Melissa, with anything coming up with Give Local? Or I know there's a lot that's going to happen in this next quarter, and I just want to make sure you guys have your answers. And you know, of course, it's almost 2:30, so if you need to leave, thank you. I'll stick around for a couple minutes and answer some questions, but thank you for joining us today, and I really appreciate participation, and I hope you left again with 1 or 2 ideas or thoughts. And then don't just do it by yourself. Go find somebody else to do it with you. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Open to questions, thoughts. Oh, yes, we did record, and we'll include the links that we talked about in the chat, right, Melissa? Yeah. You're welcome, Frank. You're welcome, Hillary, Megan. You guys do great work.
Thanks everyone for coming, and thank you, Becca, for
You're welcome.
coming and giving this exciting talk. I always love hearing from you.
Oh, thank you.
So
I
always have something new to learn.
I love what I do. I'm always a resource. So if there's anything I can do to be helpful for you all, please reach out. I mean, I'm here. So we'll include my contact information, you know, in that, and you can always reach out, even with the simplest question. So, all right. Okay, everybody, have an awesome afternoon.
Bye.
And we'll see you all soon. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, thanks for everything, Becca.